Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new music biopic from director James Mangold, who is known for Logan and Walk the Line and some other really big films. This is his new biopic film about Bob Dylan. It's called A Complete Unknown. And what essentially this film is about is it follows Bob Dylan's life throughout the 1960s, his rise to fame, kind of some struggles he faced, how he got label records, how he got venues to perform at, how his on and off relationship with Joan Baez kind of both helped him out and also impacted him emotionally and kind of brought out some of his inner demons at the same time. It also shows the history, how history kind of played out and how that impacted Bob Dylan's life and what kind of songs he decided to write at the time, how that both created controversy and how that got people to kind of side along with what he was doing and create fans for his ideas for what he was trying to do for people. So essentially, what this film is it's following his life throughout the '60s. We follow, like I said, like the rise and not really the fall of Bob Dylan, but some struggles that he most certainly faced at that time, and as well as kind of trying to answer his thinking process of how he does certain things, while also kind of keeping him as a complete unknown, as the title suggests. But overall, guys, I enjoyed this film. It's not the best James Mangold film I've ever seen. He's done some really good films. Copland, Logan, Ford v Ferrari, all those are terrific films. I don't think A Complete Unknown is quite as good as those films, but for a Bob Dylan biopic, for me personally, I knew a little bit about Bob Dylan going in, but I didn't know as much about Bob Dylan as, say, like a hardcore fan would. So there's definitely some surprises here as far as some things that I learned about him and things that kind of match up with things that I've kind of already knew about him going into the film. So let's go over some positives and negatives of what I thought about it. But like I said, overall, I enjoyed the film. There's certainly some great things about it. It's another great film that James Mangold can add to his resume. But there's also some negatives along the way that prevent it from being the absolutely terrific James Mangold slash Bob Dylan biopic that I'm sure that some of us were hoping to get. But like I said, for my positives, I would say first and foremost, Timothee Chalamet as Bob Dylan, Monica Barboa from Top Gun Maverick plays Joan Baez here, and Boyd Holbrook from Logan plays Johnny Cash here. All three performances I thought were absolutely terrific. I think most of them were trained by the musicians themselves that they played, while also getting training on guitar and singing and all this other stuff to prep them for their roles in here. Timothée Chalamet in particular really does look like Bob Dylan. He talks like him. The way that he interacts with people very much feels like the way that real life Bob Dylan would interact with other people based on what I know about him. Same with Monica Barboa as Joan Baez. Even just the way she sings and performs feels very similar to what I know about her as a musician. And obviously the stuff we know about Johnny Cash. And ironically, this is the second time James Mangold has done a film involving Johnny Cash, so clearly he really likes that guy. And so Boyd Holbrook plays Johnny Cash this time. Once again, does a terrific job. Really does look like he impersonates, embodies the person really well. Performance-wise, this is a terrific film. James Mangold really gives really good performances out of his performers. Another thing I really liked about the film is it shows just how music kind of becomes people's lives when they pursue a career in music, and how history can kind of shape some of the songs that they write. And it really does show that well with the Bob Dylan character, where it really does show that he really kind of connects with people through music. He relates to music. Anytime he's deep in thought on something, he immediately goes to music and wants to write songs about it, and how certain events in history, like JFK's assassination, forms the way he writes on certain songs and how the lyrics of his music connects with people. So I thought that's another really strong aspect of the film, is showing how music can form somebody's life around something like this, and how history really can form the way that people think about what kind of subjects they want to write about as far as when they create music goes. I also liked how kinetic James Mangold's camera work was here. It really does kind of follow the musicians around. If there's more than one musician in the room, he's able to kind of move the camera in such a way where you're still watching, Bob Dylan or Joan Baez, but also seeing some of their other performers that are helping them out with their music. So just the way he's always kinetic with the camera, he's always making sure you're engaged with what's going on in the scene, I thought was very effective. Once again, it does show just how good of a filmmaker James Mangold is and how he's always making sure you're involved with the scenes that are happening on screen. I liked how the music of Bob Dylan also is kind of the way the musical score is formed. Whether it's him just practicing notes for a song he wants to make, practicing notes for a song he's about to perform on stage in another scene later. So it's really not a film where it's a very kind of silent score, but when the score is most heard, it's essentially to Bob Dylan music and how he's either playing the guitar off screen somewhere and he's practicing his notes for a song later in the movie. So it's a very interesting take on how to do a score for a Bob Dylan movie, whether it is just him practicing notes for later in the film or hearing his music in an interesting way that adds mood to the scene in a way that it should create the mood for the scene. And I thought it was just a very effective way to do a score for a Bob Dylan film without having to completely reinvent the wheel as to what would a Bob Dylan score sound like in his own movie. I also like some of the comedic banter that happens between some of the musicians in the film, whether it's people that Bob is performing with on television, or it's with Joan Baez, when he's really disagreeing with her, or the way that Johnny Cash is trying to push him to do some of that more controversial stuff that he's known for. I just like the way that the banter happens between certain musicians in this film. I thought it was very effective. A lot of the audience members I attended the film with were really laughing out loud at those moments too. So I thought some of the comedic banter that was written for the script for this film was very effective. But for my negatives of A Complete Unknown, I needed more insight on Bob Dylan. It is one of those films where they do want to kind of cloud him in mystery while also kind of showing kind of his thinking process on things and how he does things. But I really did need more insight about him. I really felt like I left the film having more questions than answers. Even though I did learn a lot of things about Bob Dylan as a person and as a musician, I needed more insights about him. What was his childhood like? Why does he think that way? Why did he choose the guitar? Why did he choose the harmonica? Why does he? How does certain songs, certain kind of lyrics match up to certain notes on his strings on his guitar? There's certain things in it that I think they could have offered more insight on. So for those who aren't as familiar with Bob Dylan, can learn a little bit more about him. So I think that one of the biggest film's downfall is they want to cloud him in mystery while also giving insight. But as a result, because you want to cloud him in mystery, you were not able to have the insights we need to properly learn about him the way we would in probably another biopic, or how another biopic would try to keep certain aspects of mystery, but also making sure that those insights are helpful and they help us get the best possible knowledge on that person as well. I also thought another thing the film could have done better is start at an earlier time in Bob Dylan's life, because we do kind of follow him right where he's not quite famous yet, but he's at that point where he's always traveling, he's always meeting with other musicians, he's trying to find like the best possible way to start doing music for his audience. So that's kind of where we find him at the beginning of the film. And for me personally, after seeing the film in completion, I think starting at an earlier time in Bob Dylan's life would have been more effective. I would have liked to have seen what his home life was like, well, a little bit of what his childhood was like, what got him into music, what personally made him choose the guitar, what made him choose the harmonica, what made him choose the way he writes his music. There's just a lot of mystery here that I think could have been answered better if they just even started a little earlier in the timeline of Bob Dylan's life. I think that's something that would have helped the film very much so in getting this the best possible Bob Dylan biopic. I also thought the film became, and I know it's kind of an ironic one, but I really did think the film became too music heavy by the third act. And what I mean by that is because we have so much story going on, because we have so many relationships introduced, whether it is Joan Baez or Johnny Cash or these other people that he's met over the course of his life during this film, the film really just kind of focuses on how people were reacting both positive and negatively to his music at a folk song concert that he's attending and that he's performing at. And it really just kind of focuses on that in the third act. And there is a lot of loose ends that they still got to tie up by that time in the movie. So I did think the film became a little too music heavy in the third act and really kind of left story to the side at that point in the film. So that is one aspect of the story I think could have been better, is making sure the story was still kind of being told and being effective rather than just focusing on the music of Bob Dylan at that point in the film. And like I just mentioned earlier, another thing I think the film could have been better with is not enough character closures were done properly. There is a lot of loose ends with Joan Baez. There is a lot of loose ends with Johnny Cash and some of these record producers and other musicians, and this other musician that Bob Dylan becomes friends with, that's played by Edward Norton. There's a lot of loose ends with him. There's just a lot of things where the film doesn't properly wrap up the way it should at a certain time. Though we're told in these title cards what happened to some of these musicians later in life, I thought the film could have done a better job finding the best possible way to wrap up how some of these characters closed out at this point in history, whether it is something on how they transitioned into the 70s or what exactly they were working on right as the film ends. But overall, guys, I'm going to give A Complete Unknown an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a very effective film. I think James Mangold's made a really good film here. Like I said, performance-wise, it's great. The way the music is handled in the film is obviously very good. It does show how music kind of becomes people's lives when they pursue something like this. I liked how kinetic James Mangold's camera work was here. I also liked how the film's musical score is very much based on Bob Dylan's music. The comedic banter between the musicians I thought was very effective, but like I said, we really needed more insights here. I think starting at an earlier time in Bob Dylan's life would have helped this film quite a bit. It did become a little too music heavy by the third act for me, and I also thought some of the character closures could have been handled better as well as the film was coming to an end. But it's an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I really enjoyed the film. I recommend seeing it. Even if you're not a huge Bob Dylan fan, I think there's just enough here where you're going to enjoy kind of learning about some of the way he creates his music and stuff like that, even if it's not quite as insightful as it probably should have been. But it's an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I do recommend seeing A Complete Unknown. Be sure to see this one. It's quite good.